Hi, and welcome to lesson number 2 on social influence. And today we're going to be looking at explanations of conformity. Last lesson, we looked at the two types of conformity, which were internalization, that is both public and private conformity, and compliance, which is public but not private conformity. So, we need to know for our examinations the two types of explanations of why we conform in the first place. Remember, this is trying to explain the types of conformity, that is internalization and compliance. Now, the first explanation that us psychologists are going to give is normative social influence. And this is just going on from the premise that we as human beings, we have that basic need to feel accepted or approved of or liked wherever we go. For example, you go to a new school, for example, and all the school are wearing their skirts really low, high up. They keep rolling it up, for example. And you can't come now with your skirt all the way down to your ankles because you'll feel that the group would not accept you or approve of that. So therefore, you're going to change your behavior to feel approved of or accepted. So you're going to start rolling your skirt off or up, even though you don't necessarily believe it privately, but publicly you're doing it just for those reasons of wanting to have that need of feeling accepted or approved of. So this explanation of social influence leads to what we looked at last lesson. So it leads to compliance, because publicly you're more likely to display the behavior because you want to feel accepted, but privately you don't really believe it and you may still think it's quite silly, really. The second explanation that we need to know for our examinations is informational social influence. Now, this type of social influence is based on a premise that we as human beings, we have that basic need of wanting to be right all the time. I mean, we have our own behavior and we see other people's behavior, and we need to be sure of what we're doing and if it's correct or not. I'll give you an example. If you go into like a mosque or a religious organization, wherever it may be, and for example, they all take off their shoes. Now, because you've never been there before, what you start doing is you start looking at other people's behavior. You start evaluating their own behavior, and you start to see these people as correct because everybody's doing it. You start seeing them as experts, and that is where our basic need comes in. If we're in an ambiguous, that means unclear situation, we're more likely to look to other people to address what we should be doing. Okay, so this type of conformity leads to internalization, because publicly we do it, but privately we think it's right as well. So our viewpoint has changed. So you can see how the two different explanations lead on to the type of conformity. So just to be clear, compliance and normative social influence. Yeah, so going back, normative social influence leads to compliance, and informational would lead to internalization. Right, let's try a few examples. Right, so despite knowing the dangers, Lisa smokes because all of his, Lisa's a boy in this case, all of his friends do. So, the type of conformity we would say is compliance, because Lisa knows the dangers privately, but publicly Lisa still smokes because all of his friends do. And how we explain that type of behavior is going to be through normative social influence. And what this means basically is Lisa has the desire to feel approved, liked, and accepted. So, therefore, because she wants to feel this way, she's more likely to take part in dangerous types of behavior, such as smoking. So what I want you to do, I want you to look at the rest of the examples and see if you can link the type of conformity and afterwards the explanation of conformity. You can pause it if you want to. The last two, Ash and Moscovici, we haven't actually covered yet, but if you go on to later lessons, you'll see the lesson on Ash's study and Moscovici's study as well to help you on those two. So let's take a look at a typical examination question. And they call this, for AS Psychology, they call this the application questions, simply because they want you to apply your knowledge of what you know about conformity to a scenario. And in this case, they're talking about Emma, Kate. You need to be using what is going on with Kate and Emma in your answers. So let's read it. Everyone seems to think that Emma is funny. She makes people laugh with her jokes, except Kate. Kate doesn't think Emma is funny at all. At this stage, what you'll do is you'll highlight doesn't think Emma is funny at all. And you'll be like, oh, so privately, Emma doesn't think that's funny. Okay? She still laughs at her jokes though. And you'll highlight that bit. She still laughs at her jokes though. Because publicly, she's still laughing, but privately, she actually doesn't think she's funny at all. So we can now immediately, before we start looking at the examination question, know what type of conformity it is, and for example, and explain that type of conformity. So let's take a look at it. Use what you've learned about conformity to explain, the key word here being explain. It doesn't say to tell us the type, but it tells us to explain Kate's behavior. So we know we're going to be talking about either normative or informational social influence. So when you're writing this, it's 4 marks. So you're basically going to have at least 4 bits of information in this particular question. And how long you spend? If you keep it on average, a mark a minute plus 2 thinking time, it shouldn't take you more than 6 minutes to write this particular question. So when you're writing this question, you need to think about Kate's basic needs. So that should get you 1 part of the mark. So Kate's basic need is to feel accepted, approved, and liked. Okay? How these needs lead her to conform. Okay? So because she wants to feel this way, these needs, which is called normative social influence, leads her to publicly laugh at Emma's jokes, but privately she doesn't think they're funny at all. So you need to be able to identify and talk about the scenario that they're giving to you as well, and which type of conformity this leads to for your final marks. You say this will now lead to compliance as, and you give an example why. So Kate's basic needs, how these lead her to conform, because she basically doesn't want to be disapproved of by the group. So you explain all those things as well. She basically wants the group to like her. So therefore, because everybody else is laughing, that's why Kate would laugh as well. It's a very straightforward answer, but one thing, just do remember to apply it to the scenario that they give to you, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to get the full marks.